The way you enter markets matter, and you have to be patient. Nothing's going to happen overnight. You know, if you were to invest in Procore in 2002, the internet was not at the job site. There was no such thing as mobile technology at all. We just were super early. I knew it was going to happen. I'd seen all these other industries digitize, and I'm like, it's just a matter of time. We just have to be patient.
What's been the biggest lessons from international expansion?
You know, it's really tempting to say what worked in the US market is going to work in another market. I would say some of the biggest lessons learned was,
Tooey, I am so excited for this. You very kindly said you listened to the show before. I've been a fan of the Procore business from afar for a while, so I'm very excited, and thank you for joining me.
I think I'm equally as excited, Harry. I'm a huge fan of what you do, and so this is quite an honor to get to join you today.
It's not at all, but Procore has been an epic 21-year journey, and I heard from a little birdie that actually this is down to your wife Hillary, who came up with the idea, wanting to move to Santa Barbara, but that was all I got. So how did Hillary, Santa Barbara move lead to Procore?
So I was running a small tech company up in the Bay Area in the heart of Silicon Valley. And by the way, I was flying all over the United States, servicing clients in a completely different industry. And my wife said to me one day, "Hey, guess what? We're moving to Santa Barbara." And I said, "No, we're not. We live in the Bay Area and I run a business up here." She goes, "No, your son and I are moving to Santa Barbara. We haven't seen you in months because all you do is travel. And if we're not going to see you, we'd rather not see you in Santa Barbara than San Francisco." And so I, just very much against my best judgment, I came down here kind of kicking and screaming. And lo and behold, we started building a house, and, she got sick of me complaining about the challenges of building the house. And so she said to me, like, "Hey, why don't you just go out and solve this problem and stop complaining about it?" And that was the origin story of Procore. So it's all her idea.
Tell me, have you given her due credit along the way, Tooey?
No, I take all the credit. No, I'm just kidding. I learned long ago, Harry, that yes, you do give credit where credit is due. One other really funny story along the way was I started Procore in the guest room of our house, and I was by myself for a long time. And one day my wife came in, and I was on the phone with one of our customers, and she said, "Hey, you got to get off the phone. I need your help." And I said, "Well, no," I'm kind of like, "Hey, I'm on the phone. Like, this is a customer." And she kept coming in. And finally I said, "Look, I got to call you back." And I said, "What is going on?" And she said, "Well, I'm making a recipe, and I need you to run down to the local grocery store to buy me an ingredient because I'm kind of stuck." And so at that moment, I said, "You know what? I'm going to go rent an office somewhere, and I'm going to get out of here." So she then encouraged me through that action to actually go out and start Procore by opening up our first office. So she gets credit for that too.
And the secret to marriage, which is say yes and space.
I've been married for 25 years, and the most important word in my marriage has always been yes.
Everyone who wants to work from home, it's like, you're single, right?
Yeah.
I guess you. I spoke to many of your investors, board members. I heard so many awesome things. One thing I want to start on is like the GFC apparently really hard time. And there was, I think Will and Brian both said this. You almost went bust. I think it was a time when you stopped paying yourself. What happened there, Tooey?
Yeah. Well, it was a really rough time. So we were selling our software to mostly custom home builders prior to the great financial crisis. And of course, the very first part of the construction industry that fell apart was the custom home business market. So our customers all went out of business. And so we had to shift really, really quickly to commercial construction. But in that 2-year time frame that it took for us to kind of make that shift, myself and Steve Zahm, my co-founder, we had to go without a paycheck. And I'll never forget, Harry, having to go home and tell my wife, who, by the way, at this point, we had sold everything that we had acquired in life. Like I had like 2 mortgages on the house. I'd sold, a car. I'd sold to make payroll. I had nothing left to sell. And I told my wife one day when I went home, I'm like, "Look, we're not going to get paid for a while." And I was scared to death of how she was going to respond. And the coolest thing of all is that she was like, "Look, I believe in this vision as much as you do. Let's make it happen." So I got really, really lucky. And thank goodness Steve Zahm's wife didn't kick him out of the house either. So we were able to go for a couple of years and just scrape by, borrowing money from friends and family just to get by. But we got by.
I mean, you always had your body.
I I never. It's
You
not
like
really
I had
worth
nothing
it,
left to say.
actually.
I'm like, well, you weren't expecting this to go that direction, were you? But
I
again,
did not see that one coming.
this is British humor at its worst. My question to you is like, that is an intensely stressful pressure. I mean, everything's on the line. Tooey, what are you telling yourself at that moment?
People ask me this question all the time. And when I think about it kind of in arrears, when I kind of rewind time, look, I think the one thing about being a founder who's so devoted to the mission is that you don't question it. Like, I knew it was a foregone conclusion that somehow this industry, this construction industry, was going to get digitized. And I believed in our approach. I just felt like it was, if people would give me enough time, I was going to figure this out. So I didn't really stop to kind of question and I'm grateful for that.
Can I ask, how do you think about the question when you're advising founders of when is the right time to say, it's not working? Because at some points, something just doesn't work. How do you advise them?
Yeah, I think kind of instinctually if something's not working. And the other thing is that clearly Procore didn't work for years, right? Like, the story, right? We didn't really raise institutional money until like our 15th year. Like it was a long time. But like, I think you just know as a founder if it's going to work or it's not. I also believe that founders are usually cut from a different cloth, which is, I always say, like, I'm a dog on the bone. Like, no one was ever going to take this vision away from me because I just knew it was going to happen. And so I could have made a small business out of it, or I could have made a medium-sized or a large business out of it. But ultimately, if it wasn't going to work, I think you just know it. And fortunately for me, I never had to have that experience.
You said founders are cut from a different cloth there. I'm actually a secret armchair psychologist, but I find it a really interesting question. What do you think you're running to, and what do you think you're running from?
It's a really good question. You have to understand, let's start with the running from, and then I'll tell you where I was running to. I was a horrible student in school. I was flunking out of school left, right, and center. My guidance counselor told me that there were probably some good jobs out there for me, but they weren't going to be very lucrative jobs. And I had failed out of college, and I was a carpenter by trade, so I really had very low expectations of myself as well as what my family thought of me. Thank goodness I had a trade of being a carpenter, which I have the most respect for. I decided one day that I wanted to prove everyone wrong, that I wasn't this kind of person that was kind of a mediocre person at best. And so I was running from that stigma, and I wanted to prove to myself I was more than what people thought of me as.
What changed? You have years and years of respectfully being mediocre or not, flunking, as you said at school there, to suddenly deciding you wanted to be so much more. What happened?
Well, what's interesting is I think in hindsight, like, look, I'm 56 years old. When I was in high school and elementary school, I don't think that they had diagnosis for dyslexia or whatever, and I'm sure I'm dyslexic. I'm also an autodidact. So if you give me something that I'm passionate about, I'll blow your socks off at how much of an expert I become at it and whatever else, but I have to be interested in it. And so what changed for me was I found my passion in life, and I devoted my life to that passion. And that's why I just never stopped, because that's just my personality type. And I think that's why founders are cut from a different cloth. You have to have more than just an interest in something in order to succeed.
Do you have to love what you do?
I'm fortunate that I get to love what I do. Some founders, Steve Zahn, my co-founder, he had a company he took public before Procore. I think from founding to IPO, it was like 13 months, right? Some founders are really lucky because you don't have to go through the years of the dark times to get to success. For me, I wouldn't have made it if I didn't love what we did, because we just had so many years of just strife and turmoil that just wasn't, I wouldn't have been able to sustain it if I didn't love it.
What are you running towards on the flip side?
I have this this vision that we are going to be able to connect everybody in construction on a global platform. And that seems really kind of esoteric, but I know construction. I grew up in construction. I know how dysfunctional it is. And I know how technology and automation can actually change the industry. So I'm running for this vision, and I always wonder if there will be a day in my life where I actually see it happen, like fully, because it's happening, we're having a lot of success doing it, but like, will it ever truly be done? And so I think I'm running towards this vision of it being done, which I think a lot of founders lie to themselves too, that there will be a nirvana state in the future where everything is going to be where you expect it to be. And I think that's just the survival instinct that we all have. But I think I'm running towards that.
Can I ask you a bit of a blunt question, which is for the first 10 years, as you said, it was slow. I think it was 2012 and it was like 4.8 million in revenue 10 years afterwards. Not hyper growth. Bluntly, sorry, respectfully.
Easy.
But my question to you is like, why was that? When you analyze that, why did it not grow fast and why did it take so long?
Rewind time to 2002. If you walked onto any construction site in the world, there was no internet at the job site. Yet I had built a vertical SaaS solution to serve an industry that couldn't actually use my technology, right? So those were the tough days.
I hear you used to do some pretty crazy things to get customers Wi-Fi. Thanks, Brian. What did you do?
So we literally, Steve Zahm and I literally would buy airline tickets, go to a customer. We went to Sea Island, Georgia, which is on the other side of the United States. We went to CompUSA and we bought a router and bought a wireless access point and then we went to Home Depot and bought a toolbox. And we actually went to the job site. This is like what we used to do. And we would install the internet at the job site. So a customer could then, pay us $95 a month for our service. The answer to the question was the internet was not at the job site. There was no such thing as mobile technology at all. The iPhone didn't come out till 2007, for goodness sakes. iPad in 2011. We just were super, super early. But, I knew it was going to happen. It was the last industry I was aware of that had not digitized. And I'd seen all these other industries digitize, and I'm like, it's just a matter of time before it happens. We just have to be patient.
I need your help. I'm an investor today, and I don't like to take market timing risks just because it's an externality that's so out of both of our control. What would you say to me, who's fearful of market timing, given the depth of what you've been through?
The more things that have to happen in order for a company to be successul, the higher the risk ratio is, right? So I would look at it definitely that way. If you were to invest in Procore in 2002, I didn't even take our first friends and family till 2004. But if you were to invest then, you would have had to believe the internet, first of all, that the construction industry was going to digitize. Second of all, that the people that work in construction were actually going to be proficient enough in technology to use it. Third, that the internet was going to need to make it to the job site. Fourth, that mobile applications were going to be able to untether people from a job site trailer to actually do their job in the field. And fifth is that people would actually look at these tools as productivity gain tools as opposed to documentation tools. So all of those things would have had to have happened in order for you to believe that Procore was going to be successful.
You're not selling it.
Well, so the risk ratio as an investor, right, is much higher for those things. By the way, I don't know if you know the story of Qualcomm, but Irwin Jacobs, who started Qualcomm, in order for Qualcomm is a very big company. In order for Irwin Jacobs to be successful at Qualcomm, he needed to invent the technology behind CDMA, which was brand new technology and was barely able to be done. He needed to get all the wireless carriers to take all of their infrastructure out and replace it with new CDMA infrastructure. He needed to create handsets that could use CDMA, so he had to invent a cell phone that would work. And then he would had to invent the chips in order to make this processing actually possible. You look at that investment, the same thing as Procore, like that's a high risk investment. All those things had to become true in order for them to be successful. But with those high risk investments come tremendous rewards. And I think that's the way I would look at it.
And then there's the hard thing also, bluntly, that's just on the timing side. If all of those things happen, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to adopt it straight away. Then you have like buyer propensity, customer education, like... Oh my God.
Well, in the competitive landscape before the great financial crisis, there were a lot of companies out there that were bigger than Procore that were trying to kind of digitize the construction industry. I mean, the landscape was just littered with companies, and we were just like a minuscule little player. And honestly, if we didn't have the wherewithal to survive the great financial crisis, thanks primarily to one of our investors who kept pumping money into Procore, we wouldn't have survived. And what's really interesting is 2010 rolls around and we look at the competitive landscape. they're all gone. It's a wasteland of just dead companies, and we're the only ones surviving.
Why did they all die first?
Well, first and foremost, the internet really had not made it to the job site. They were all kind of betting on the come, and it just hadn't really been adopted yet. Like you asked earlier about like what, when was that inflection point? We didn't really hit an inflection point until 2015. Between 2002 and 2015, we'd grown revenue from $0 to $9.6 million, right? Over that long period of time. But from 2015 on, it started to accelerate. So we didn't even see, you would have had to survive from 2009-10 all the way to 2015 to see this industry starting to adopt this type of technology. So there just was, you had to have enough resources to stick it through.
I just love you two. I mean, no offense, like 13 years, plunder. I mean, that is like real persistence. No wonder marriage is a piece of cake. But my question is like 2015, what happened then? Because I spoke to Brian and he said, like, ask him why you chose institutional financing then as the first point. What changed in the business then? And why did you raise money then?
Steve Zahm stopped going to the mailbox every day. And let me tell you what that means. For 13 years, we would, every day, Steve Zahm, co-founder, we'd go to the mailbox and wait for a check from a customer to make sure that we can make payroll, right? So every day I would see Steve in the hallway and I'm like, what's going on? He's like, oh, I'm going to get the mail. So I see if we can make payroll. One day I caught him in the hallway in 2014, 15. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, nothing. He goes, but what I'm not doing is I'm not going to the mailbox. And I said, why? And he goes, we have enough money in our account. The customers are, we have enough revenue now that I don't have to run to the mailbox every day to check for checks. So we realized at that point we had turned some sort of a corner and that it was time to step on the accelerator. We had some product market fit and all we needed to do was go out and raise some capital to bring this idea to market.
Was that a change that you had made or was it the market changing to you?
The market definitely changed to us. We had not changed anything. We had been building the same product for 13 years, but the market finally, adopted it.
What do you say then to founders who do have market timing and market adoption risks like you had and are told you need to do something? Like they have investors. We can't just wait.
Yeah. Well, trust me, we didn't just wait either. We did a lot of things as a company that supplemented our income in order to make payroll through those lean years. I don't know if those were the best ideas, but they kept us alive. We, customers would ask us to do custom development on a new application, and if they're going to pay us $30,000 for a month's worth of work, we would literally put 2 engineers on it and just ship a piece of software that had nothing to do with Procore for them just to keep the lights on. So I would just say, like, look, as they say, the only thing that matters in business is that you survive to fight another day. And so whenever I talk to founders who are like, look, it looks like it's all over. I'm like, just the oxygen to the business is revenue. Just go generate some freaking revenue, and you'll survive.
I absolutely love that and totally with you there. So take me to that conversation. You're like, Steve, no mailbox walk for you. And he's like, yeah. And then you go, why didn't we go raise money? How does that conversation then come to be? So
you have to understand the dichotomy between Steve and myself. So I'm the carpenter who failed out of college, right? Steve's the Stanford grad who went to, got his MBA at Haas at Berkeley. A lot of these companies, if you think about it, a lot of big successful companies actually have this kind of dichotomy in co-founders, right? So Steve was very much business focused, and he was the one who was like making all of the kind of recommendations. So he said to me, he's like, Tooey, like, look, I think we have enough product market fit that we could actually go out and figure this out and raise some capital. And so I was like, well, I'd always known we were going to, and that we were going to have this opportunity. So I was pretty bought in right off the bat. I was a little intimidated, walking up and down Sand Hill Road and, meeting the likes of Brian Feinstein and Byron Dieter and Will Griffith and,
How did it go? Like, no, this is your first time. This is 13 years in. Can you take me to those meetings?
Well, let me take you to an earlier meeting. So we walked up and down Sand Hill Road in 2008, right? So we were a little we were a little ambitious in 2008. Everything was going up and to the right. Our customers were doing really, really well. The economy hadn't hit the skids yet. So we walked up and down Sand Hill Road, And we went into, I'm not going to name their name, but we went into one of the largest institutional investors that everybody knows. And they put us in the back dark conference room with the junior analyst. And we were pitching them on Procore. And literally the guy said to me, he goes, look, this is really an interesting idea and there's probably some opportunity here. But if you did it more like Facebook, we would be interested in investing. So essentially, then they kicked us out of the building and everyone laughed at us. And it was really funny because literally they were calling us idiots. They're like, you're selling software to an industry that can't use your software. Like, what are you doing? You guys are idiots. And then it's funny, you fast forward to 2015, 2016, and 17, and we're up raising money, and everyone's like, you guys are geniuses. Like, you figured something out that nobody else has figured out. And it's funny that I'm like, we're still the same person. We're probably more idiots than geniuses. But anyhow, it's just funny to have the same people refer to you now as a genius when they were calling you an idiot 5 years before.
So 2000, I love that in terms of why don't you be more like Facebook? That's so helpful. Thank you. Why don't you be more like Mike Moritz? But, we can both play that game. What happened then? So 2008, you kind of come back with the tail between your legs and go, okay, that was a bit preemptive. And is that how it went? And then you come back 7 years later?
Yeah. Then we, so I guess I was saying we were a little intimidated going back, right? When because we had such a demoralizing experience on our first run, at institutional investors. But the good news was we learned that it's almost less about the brand of the venture firm, and it's more about the partner, right? And so I got to know both Will Griffith and Brian Feinstein personally, deeply personally, and I spent a lot of time with them as well as some other investors that we ended up not going with. I decided that I was going to make sure I was going to be working with people who shared our values and actually were really vested in our success, and it wasn't just another deployment of capital. This was somebody that was going to lean in and be very heavily engaged in this journey. And fortunately for me, we found two amazing institutional investors that till this day are on our board and till this day believe in our mission and are 100% behind what we're doing. And so we got very lucky.
Can I ask you, when you review that fundraise, first off, what was that deal? How much cash did you raise?
We raised 30 million, I think, in the first one.
30 million. Do you remember the price?
Well, I remember this. So Bessemer, I don't know if Brian told you this, but Bessemer had an investment thesis on Procore that of course, they don't tell the company about. They thought that Procore, the best outside scenario they could come up with was that Procore was going to be worth $300 million in the future. And we always joke about that because I think we're a little bit beyond that, right? So, yeah. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but we had a co-lead on our Bessemer investment, a guy named Paul Landris, who was with Brian in the investment. I hired Paul to join Procore after we had done the fundraising. And Paul ended up becoming our CFO. But Paul told me all of the backstories of what the partners were saying about Procore during the investment thesis. And it was kind of shocking that they,
I had Jeff Lawson on the show from Twilio, and he said a similar story, but actually he got a 200 million premium on you. They said 500 million for Twilio.
I love it.
It seems that they grossly underestimate the upside, which is probably a good thing. Can I ask, when you review those fundraising days, is there anything that you'd tell yourself? If you could advise yourself on fundraising again, what would you say?
Yeah, I actually think about this a lot because one of my biggest challenges, Harry, is that I like people, as we've talked about in the past, and I really get invested in the relationships. And some folks, not the two folks that I'm talking about that are institutional investors, but some investors really tried to leverage their ability to kind of manipulate my feelings and making me feel guilty for not going with them and stuff like that. I would have run probably a much more, I listened to your discussion with Scott from Atlassian and how they did the closed envelope fundraising. And I'm like, I was thinking to myself, I wish we had done that because it would have taken a lot of this. I mean, I literally was getting calls from institutional investors saying you're taking food out of my kids' mouths because you're not giving me access to this deal and stuff like it was kind of those kind of guilty things that I just didn't really enjoy. It's one of the reasons why I went with Brian and Will was because they were very, very straightforward with me and they just ran a good process.
Are they aware of the fee model in asset management? I think the only food leaving kids' mouths is kind of, some very expensive truffle.
Well, it's funny too. The person that said that to me had flown down here on a private jet, so I was kind of not concerned that their deal was going to make it so their kids didn't eat.
That is absolutely amazing. I love that. Can I ask, when did it really ramp then? So then you raise money from, Bessemer and, your then future CFO.
Yeah.
And you were at 9.6 million, I think you said. When was it like? Woof?
It really started within about a year, where we would double and then double again and double again and double again. And so it really did. Around 2017, we were rolling. What's really interesting to me, Harry, is in hindsight, we never stopped to kind of think about what the heck was happening. Because when I was a kid, I was a skateboarder, right? And so when I was skateboarding down the hill and you get too fast and you get speed wobbles, you have to leap off your skateboard. You're hoping that your feet can run as fast as the speed of the skateboard so you don't fall on your face. Those years were us running as fast as we possibly could, trying not to crash. So we had no time to kind of think about like, what the heck's going on here? You kind of wake up and you look around, and I'll never forget when we got a $1 billion valuation on Procore and we're raising some private capital. We were all standing in a hotel room somewhere. We were at a conference, the leadership team, and I was talking to our investors about, the pricing the round, and it came up to be $1 billion. And I'll never forget, that was a moment where I'm like, I cannot, I had missed like 100 million in valuation to $1 billion, and that we were all like, wow, we've significantly grown this business, and it kind of happened without us thinking about it.
Can I ask, do you think naivety is a good thing? You mentioned there about kind of falling on your face. People say it is. Sometimes they say it's not. How do you think about that one?
I actually do believe that ignorance sometimes is bliss, not all the time. I also think that you can be too smart for your own good. So I think that, us having this singular focus on what we were doing, not trying to just build a business, but actually solve a real problem and satisfy the needs of the customers, just kept us really, really focused. And so you can call it naivete or whatever, but that's all we were really thinking about,
So it's really interesting. You said there about focus. I chatted, and sorry, this wasn't in the schedule because I actually just heard it from Will and Brian. So recent additions. But I heard about kind of the dozen products that we now have at Procore. And I wanted to ask, and they asked actually, to be fair, I'm such a VC, take credit for others' work. You can tell it's a natural proclivity of mine. What have been your biggest lessons in terms of scaling product line without losing focus?
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons in there, right? So we up until 2017, we only had one product. It was our project management tool, and it's still our flagship product. But what we had heard was our customers were sick of having point solutions, and so they really wanted to have our platform be the platform of choice for all of their kind of core business needs, from financial management to quality and safety and things that matter in construction. And so we very deliberately force rank those. So we prioritized which are the biggest needs, and we kind of worked our way down from there. And so I would say some of the lessons learned were one big lesson we learned was, in the early days, you're kind of faking it till you make it. And you don't really realize that scale might happen. And so some of our financial product line was a great example. Was, we had built that very quickly, got it to market, arguably wasn't 100% enterprise grade. So we actually had to stop developing that product at a certain point and go back and re-architect it so it was enterprise grade. And we literally stopped new feature development for a year. But we realized that if we weren't going to get this thing to the point where it was enterprise grade, we weren't going to be able to scale it.
What year was that realization?
It was probably 2019.
Wow.
Yeah. Shit. We had to tell our customers, look, though all we've been talking to you about a lot of features that we're going to be building, we're going to actually pause on this for now. And trust us, you're gonna love it. What's so cool is that till this day, customers still come up to me and they're like, though that was really hard for us to hear, it was the smartest thing you guys ever did on that product line, because now it has completely changed the way we do business, and it's completely scalable, and it's enterprise grade. So but that was a hard decision to make.
So you scaled to, what were your revenues in 2019 though? They must have been 50 to 100?
Yeah, probably.
without having an enterprise grade product?
Well, so our project management tool, which is our flagship, was definitely enterprise grade. Okay. This was a newer product we had just brought into market, and it was kind of becoming wildly successful, and to the point where we really had to go back and shore it up to make sure that we could actually deliver on our promises. So yeah, that was a tough one.
That's a really tough one. Any other big lessons in terms of product expansion, when to do it, mistakes that were made?
I mean, timing is everything. One thing that we did learn was, so when we were selling into the Australia and New Zealand market, they had these new laws in place in Australia around if a job site accident led to a death at a construction site, and a safety violation had been seen prior to that wasn't documented, the CEO of the construction company would go to prison for manslaughter. All of a sudden, when we were talking to our customers in Australia and New Zealand, they're like, look, love your project management tool. We need quality and safety because I don't want to go to prison, right? So we're like, okay. So we started building this product for them, and we got really good product market fit. And then what we realized is that we took it, globally to our global customers. Everybody valued that new product. And so we were able to, kind of hyper scale that product because one market demanded it, but the rest of the market needed it. So we learned that we had the opportunity to kind of capitalize on those kind of finite needs and then take them globally. And, and it worked.
I'm so pleased you said about taking them globally, because Will said, obviously about the recent and the very successful kind of global expansion. He said, I'd love to hear Tooey's take on what's been the biggest lessons from international expansion, what worked, what didn't, what you wish you'd known, and hear his thoughts there.
Well, I love to tell people this, which is it's just a reminder. And every day in Procore's history, I had never been the CEO of a company of that scale before, right? So because it was growing, right? And so I had to learn a lot as we went. So there were a lot of lessons learned. Going internationally, it's really tempting to say what worked in the US market is going to work in another market. And so I would say some of the biggest lessons learned was you have to build a brand and you have to build loyal customers and referenceable customers in those markets before you really can expect any sort of scale and growth in those markets.
Does that mean you should then limit budget, do it from where you are, build that base, and then move people there? Is that how you'd recommend?
With the beautiful thing about SaaS, right, is we had a lot of customers in Australia and New Zealand long before we went to that market, just because of the way it's an internet-based tool. You can buy it from anywhere. So what I suggest you do is that you actually deploy your customer success and your field and product marketing folks there first. Build that brand, get the groundswell going with the referenceable customers, then put your go-to-market team in afterwards to capitalize on that. And all kind of candor, we went all into our early markets thinking like they're going to love us and it's all going to go well. We have learned that you really, there is a playbook here and that you have to really build that brand first. But what we find is the longer that we've been into any particular market, the more success we have. The way you enter markets matter, and you have to be patient. Nothing's going to happen overnight. It took us years to build the brand in the US, and so we have to be patient building brands in new markets.
What was the hardest market to do well in?
It's a good question. One thing that we're really kind of privileged by is that construction is done very much similarly all around the globe. So it's not like, I have friends that run financial services, software companies and stuff, and things are done differently and very differently in different regions. We have this privilege of being able to go in and have about 85% product market fit into most new territories.
Speaking of kind of doing things the same way in construction, one thing that you did quite differently compared to SaaS is most of SaaS is predicated on a per seat model. Yep. And when I spoke to obviously Will and Brian, they told me about the decision to be volume based. I'd love to hear your lessons on pricing from maybe contrarian decision to be volume based and that question of could you have been as successful if you were seat based?
No. So our mission is to connect everyone in construction on a global platform. I knew from day one that if we went with a seat-based licensing model, which, by the way, remember, I'd run a technology company before this. So I knew that was the only really prevalent model at the time, was seat-based. I knew that what would happen was our customers were going to make value decisions based upon who was going to get a seat. But the way that construction done is it's a team sport. And so you need everyone to have access to the system because everyone needs to contribute. So I realized that I couldn't go with the per seat model because that was going to actually make it so we were never going to be successful. And so I had to come up with another yardstick. And honestly, the only thing I could come up with was construction volume. One of our customers one day said to me, Harry, I said, how do you buy other things? And he said, well, I buy our insurance based off of our construction volume. So if I'm going to do $10 million worth of construction volume next year, I will buy $10 million worth of insurance. And so I thought to myself, well, here's a way that they're used to buying. And it's actually a yardstick that actually scales nicely with customer size. So let's adopt this. It was so wildly unpopular with our customers. Even till this day, some of our customers don't love it, but it's the ultimate yardstick, and we really believe in it.
Why did you keep it when it was so unpopular? Like, how did you get over that? Like, do you just educate them on why you chose it? Like, just...
Well, yeah. So we did. And, as one customer would adopt it, they would actually realize that it gives them the flexibility to buy more or less of Procore at any given time. Yet they're able to get all of their team members and their collaborators. In construction, if we sell the, Harry Construction, right? You're going to invite all your subcontractors onto the platform. Those folks are working on the platform for free. They get all the benefits of Procore, but you're paying the bill unless they want to become their own customer. So these folks would go and tell other general contractors, hey, I'm using this amazing product. So ultimately, our success kind of was the driver of adoption of this new pricing model. But like I said, even to this day, I was on a call last week with a customer who still wishes that we had a different pricing model.
Can I ask, do you think that CEOs will always need to get on calls? Procore today is a close to $9 billion public company. Do you think CEOs will always need to close the biggest customers?
So I actually have a very strict line at Procore. I do not do deal negotiations anymore, and I haven't for the last 5 or 6 years. I build relationships with the customers that I do not want to be transactional. So I make it very clear with all of our prospects and all the people that I'm talking to, customers at renewal, that I am not going to be doing the commercial terms. But what I am going to do is I'm going to be a long-term partner of theirs to put together a joint strategy of success. And so I create a very big delineation. I talk to a customer, I think, every single day. I think there's nothing more important that a CEO can do than to talk to a customer. And I actually get kind of blamed for it sometimes. Like, people are like, well, are you spending too much time? And I just don't believe you can spend too much time with the people that you're serving.
I totally agree with you. I think your team do as well, by the way. They said that. Going back to our point on punctuality, which we'll leave out timekeeping as a topic. I do want to ask one final thing on the business before we move to your leadership. Are there any other hard lessons that you think are really important to discuss? As I said, it's such a journey. I don't want to leave out an epic.
I have the privilege of mentoring some CEOs of tech companies that are growing their businesses. And one of the things that I impart on them, which I wish somebody had imparted on me, was in the early days of a tech company, you do everything. Your job is to do. Like, literally, I was writing code, I was taking out the trash, I was doing everything. At a certain point in your leadership scale, you have to learn how to stop doing and start leading. And it's a really unnatural motion for people that are just used to getting the job done themselves. And I see it till this day, Harry, with leaders at Procore, not senior leaders, but people that are moved into management roles, and the difficulty that people have of letting go of doing the actual work and empowering their people. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest challenges with anybody.
I have this problem, and then you actually finally delegate it to someone, and then they don't do it as well as you. And you go, see, I knew it. They need me. And so you go back in and do it, and then they never learn and they never do it. So help me. Yeah. Literally, how does one do this efficiently?
You have to let them fail. Now, you want to minimize the blast radius, right? You can't let them fail, which with an existential, threat. But you have to let them fail. I look at this very much like I look at parenting, right? A lot of parents' big mistakes are they watch their kid, start to stumble and fall, and they try to catch him and save him from it, right? My parenting style was always like, if Henry was going to stumble and fall, look, I didn't want him to hurt himself, but if he skinned his knee, for instance, and kids get like freaked out, and he would look up at me, I would be like, hey, that was quite a tumble you just did, as opposed to being like most parents, which are like, oh my goodness, like that is the scariest thing I've ever seen. Let me help fix you. Because you want people to learn from their mistakes, and you want to teach them without doing their job for them, how to overcome those obstacles. So it takes a lot of trust in order to do that, but you have to do that.
Do you still struggle to delegate today?
No. It's actually, I did for a long time. I realized that my kind of superpowers are not in the operational, kind of activities of the low level detail. And that one of my mottos has always been, know your strengths and know your weaknesses and hire to your weaknesses. So I know what I'm not good at. And so I hire these amazing people to supplement my challenging areas and where I'm just not empowered and I'm not passionate. And I'm gladly giving it away.
I'm so pleased you said that, because you said to me before, knowing my weaknesses has been the key to my success.
Yeah.
What are your weaknesses? And do you always agree with hiring them away, or should we actually get good at our weaknesses? Some people say so, some others not.
So I'm in the camp of you really cannot overcome your weaknesses to a level that is going to be satisfactory for the business. At the scale that Procore is at today, I can't be a mediocre finance guy, and I can't be a mediocre HR guy, and I can't be a mediocre salesperson, because that's not going to help the business. I know where my strengths are, and I know my strengths are I set the vision for the company. I help prioritize. We help build the annual plan. I provide resources to our teams. And I spend all this time with our customers, knowing what their needs are. And that's the stuff that gives me energy and fuels me. But when it comes to like the low level operations of the business, I just am not I'm just not great at it. So I surround myself with great finance people and great HR people, great legal people, doing all the work that I just am not great at, and I don't intend to be great at.
It's so funny. You said there about kind of doing the work that you're not great at, and you'll never actually become better than satisfactory at it unless you really, really try. I totally agree with you. I think there's a lot of perception and reality, or kind of Instagram and reality. How do you think about the Instagram versus reality of being a CEO?
This is one of the areas, Harry, where I'm absolutely most fascinated. So I have several mentors that are CEOs of very large companies, like very large, like the biggest companies, right? And these folks are, I admire how they run their businesses and the complexity that they have to deal with, and the challenges of like keeping a straight face or trying to keep be stoic in times of difficulty and stuff like that. I always find it's interesting that the way people approach me seems to be they're curious about like kind of like what my day-to-day job is like. So that at the Instagram side of things, like you must have it so easy. Like it's, that you're a $9 billion company and, things seem to be going up and to the right. They don't really understand the complexity of the job, and they actually think they think it's easier than it is. In reality, the job is it's a 24-hour day job. I've been doing it. I think I'm like an 8,900 days of Procore, right? Never having a day or a moment off, and it's a hard job. Does
it get easier over time?
No.
I disagree. Okay, this is
different. It gets different, right?
I agree, but like Tooey, like let's just your success is phenomenally unparalleled different to mine. But like I now am in a beautiful house and I have Fiji water and I have a massage, and yeah, it's really high pressure, but it's quite nice having like not shit I'm going to be on the street.
Trust me, having security and stability is priceless.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is the baseline level of stress involved has not diminished at all. As a matter of fact, we have 4,000 employees globally, and we have 16,000 plus customers. The blast radius of screw ups is so big that like it's you can't take that lightly.
You said 4,000 there. Brian said about the amazing culture you have. He said, ask him, what have you specifically done to have such a good culture across now 4,000?
You have to be intentional about culture. And so we are very, very
Were you always intentional about culture?
Actually, I know a few CEOs who really think people are a commodity. So I wouldn't say most that all do, but yeah, I do think it's important. And so what we have done is very intentionally, we hire to our values. So if you go through the interview process at Procore, you may think you're being interviewed for your skill set, but ultimately to get into the interview process, you've already had to demonstrate that you have the skill set to do the job. The real hurdle to get over is, do you live our values and do you value our values?
I love a good discussion. Whenever people are like, we hire to our values, I'm always like, whose values are really contrarian, respectfully, to it? So everyone wants someone who's like hardworking and ambitious and kind. I'm not a team player. I'm largely in it for the money, and I am egotistical. I'm not saying I'm any of that, but like, yeah. I could be really fucking great for a business.
So the value hiring is one piece of it. The way we solve for that is hungry, humble, smart. So we will not hire somebody who doesn't demonstrate that they're hungry and that they're humble and they're smart. And trust me, I've hired a lot of hungry and smart people in this world. They tend to be assholes, and they tend to not be good team players, and they tend to tank culture. And you know what's interesting about culture is once you get a solid culture that's based off of your values and you hire correctly, no longer as a CEO are you responsible to be the keeper of culture. The business itself keeps culture. I always say it's like angular momentum, which is once the culture's set, if somebody sneaks in through the filters and gets in that isn't a cultural fit, the teams eject them. Like you just can't survive at Procore if you are not hungry, humble, and smart. And if you don't live our values, it's just that simple.
Was there ever a time where it slightly got away from you? Where it was like, this isn't how I wanted it to be. And can you take me to that time?
Yeah, I've hired people again because they were luminaries in our industry, and I said to myself, look, they may not be humble, but they're going to move the needle. And I've regretted every single one of those decisions that I've made, and fortunately, I'm not making those decisions any longer. But yeah, those were hard lessons learned because it's some point, you really have to get real and say no to people that might have a big impact on the business, but you just know are not going to be a cultural fit. And at our scale, Harry, there's no longer a superhero at Procore who's going to move the needle, right? The only way you move the needle at Procore is you work collaboratively across teams in ways that are inclusive and basically brings the highest level of capabilities out of people in order to deliver big results. And you can't do that if you are kind of selfish and you're an individual contributor who all you want to do is root for your own success. It just doesn't work.
The thing that I've done many times, and I see a lot of founders do, is they hire the brand. Oh, they spent 10 years at Salesforce and they must be great. And then you get them there and it's just terrible. I've done it so many times.
We have definitely learned which large tech companies to not hire from. Because honestly, you can just go right back to the culture that is existent in those tech companies. And you're like, you're basically hiring in that culture.
Do you think there are tells beforehand? I know that sounds weird, but so I have some tells. Like if you're a bouncer, you got 1 year here, 1 year here, 2 years here, 1 year there. That real like negotiation on title. I need to be chief of staff, not just chief of staff.
Oh yeah. By the way, those are all the you have to look out for those. The inverse, which is really interesting, is at Procore, people will come to us and say, what do I need to do? I want to be a senior director. I'm a director. I want to be a senior director. What do I need to do? And our message to them has always been, look, do the job as a senior director in the director role. And you will naturally get promoted into being a senior director. It's not something that's like granted to you. You don't get this because you ask for it. You get it because you actually do the work and earn it.
Will you not then ignore the responsibilities of being a director? Do you see what I mean? You don't want to encourage people to do your boss's job over your boss.
Yeah, no, it's not that. But you know what? If you empower your boss by actually helping them do their job effectively, and it's not just about checking the box and doing your 9-to-5 job, you are much more apt to be promoted than if you just check the box.
I'm always like, are you a plate adder or a plate remover? Just be a fucking plate remover. Find your boss and say, what can I do to remove plates?
By the way, we have a saying at Procore is don't be a problem spotter, be a problem solver. So, you come to me with a problem and not a solution, and I'm going to march you right out of my office. Like, I don't want to hear about the problems until you have, the solution at hand. So
I totally agree with you. What do you do in the difficult situation when someone internally wants the promotion, but actually you feel it's an external hire that should get it instead? How do you manage that difficult process?
Well, it's such a broad subject because I, for 21 years, have had to make very difficult personnel decisions. One of my, a very old mentor of mine, Toby Lutke, as I'm sure you know from Shopify.
Yeah, I had him on the show. He's awesome. Someone once described him, if humans could be IP addresses, Toby would be one.
That might be the best thing I've heard in a long time.
It was Harley. Harley was like, I know better than anyone. I was like, that's so good.
They're such a great team. Like that's just, they're awesome. But he said to me, this was probably 10 years ago. He said to me, Tooey, what's important about leadership is if your business is scaling at 100% a year, that means you and your team needs to be scaling their skill set at greater than 100% a year. And so I took that to heart, which is I really do look at, I look very critically across my leadership team to make sure that my team has what it takes to take us to the next level, not rewarding them for getting us to where we came from. So I spend a lot of time having those conversations with folks saying that, like, look, there's probably somebody outside of this organization that might be able to do this job where you can learn from them and scale your own career. It's never easy, Harry. Like it's never easy.
Again, you realize that I just use this show as like a personal learning platform. That's actually why I started it, by the way. I didn't actually intend to release them. People don't know that. But yeah, I just wanted to learn from great people and realized that it was the best way to people to give me time. My question to you is, like, when people are loyal and they put in the hard work and all the inputs are there, but the output isn't there, what do you do then?
You just make the tough choice. You make the tough call. Now, fortunately, the way business works is that you don't wake up one day and realize that somebody's not scaling, right? It's you get all of the tails going up to it. If there's a leader underneath me who's starting to kind of not scale to where we need them to go, you work with them on scaling, but at a certain point you start having conversations around, like, let's find a place in the organization where you can actually be successful. And then if that doesn't work, then you with all empathy in the world, you walk them out the door and you help them find another job somewhere else. And I'm very fortunate that a lot of the people that we call it graduated from Procore, have moved on to have illustrious careers elsewhere that we've been very instrumental in helping them get. So that's the path that usually, it can go.
It's so funny. You said there about Toby's advice to you on kind of scaling at a faster rate than the company. That's really hard to do. Do you ever feel that imposter syndrome and self-doubt of, oh shit, I don't know if I can do that or keep doing that?
Yeah, there was so remember, I'm the college dropout who's a carpenter, right? I was never supposed to be a publicly traded CEO of a successful tech company, right? That was not in the cards. So as we'd grown Procore and we started hitting scale like around 2017 and 18, and things started really flying along, I started being asked to go to these investor conferences in the Bay Area. And, and it was like the time when like Jeff Lawson was there. It was like this, there was a certain graduating class that was starting to show up because they had a line of sight to an IPO. And I would sit there on these panels, and every single one of the people on the panel would have their Patagonia zip-up vest, and they'd all gone to Stanford, and they all were out of central casting. And here I am, like a college dropout carpenter, sitting on this panel going, like, what the hell do I know? That was kind of an existential crisis personally for me during that time frame, because I wasn't Frank Slootman, and I wasn't these other leaders that I looked up to just in terms of pedigree.
What did you tell yourself then? Because that's
well, so it's interesting. I'm going to bring this back to my wife, but I was miserable for probably 2 years where I tried. I even went out and bought the Patagonia vest and, whatever. I desperately want to figure this out. My wife said to me one day, she said, Tooey, on a personal basis, you're miserable. And I'm like, look, I don't know who I am and who I'm supposed to be. And she's like, that's not true. She goes, you know exactly who you are and you know exactly who you should be. Stop trying to be somebody else. And so, at that point, it was such a liberating feeling, because I'm like, you know what? I'm my best when I'm authentic and I'm vulnerable, right? So, I grew out my hair a little bit longer. And I just started being me. And with all of my warts and all of the challenges of who I am, I just decided if I couldn't be my authentic self, I wasn't going to be happy. And honestly, if they didn't like me for being my authentic self and being vulnerable, they could fire me, right? But I was willing to kind of throw my badge down on that. I really wanted to be myself. And the interesting thing, Harry, is people responded wildly, supportive. People loved seeing me be authentic and not be trying to be something I'm not. So it wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be.
I think the biggest challenge is kind of knowing who you are. And I think actually a lot of people don't know who they are. Do you think you always knew who you were?
No. In fact, I don't, I'm kind of going through a phase in my life right now where I'm really doing a lot of introspection on, what's it all mean and, who am I and what, all of that. So I don't think you ever truly know. But I think what you do know, again, is your strengths and your weaknesses. And you know kind of at the core who you are as a person. And if you just stay true to the things, I think you can deliver your authentic self every day, and it's fine.
And again, very different scales, but I had a tax bill that for me was humongous in the multiple millions, and I was very upset. And my dear friend, who's about 70, one of the best investors in the world, said, "What makes you happiest in the world?" And I said, "Walking around the park with my mum and getting an espresso." And he's like, "That's who you are. Just remember that." And I now just think of when one wonders who they are, what single case makes you happiest, Tooey?
It's funny. I do this all the time, Harry, which is on my most challenging days, when things are kind of stacking up and, no good news is landing on my desk.
It happens like that. It's just more shit.
Here comes more stuff. I call a customer. I honestly do. And there's nothing that gets me more excited and kind of grounded in the love of what I do than when I talk to a customer. So I literally do. I'll be like, I'm going to stop everything today and I'm going to call a customer. And it absolutely, changes my attitude.
Tooey, I teed you up, okay? I teed you up. I gave you the example of my mother. I gave you the chance to say, I call Hillary. No, you call a fucking customer. Brilliant. That is amazing.
Now I'm in trouble with my wife, Harry. Thank you very much.
No, listen, you got the first credit in at the beginning, so we're kind of working our way back to neutral now. I do want to just final one on CEO-ship. A common statement is that the best CEOs are the best capital allocators or resource allocators. Is that true, do you think?
Yes, I'm a huge believer. I don't know if you've read the book The Outsiders, but to me that was a absolutely cathartic experience for me to actually understand that is truly what one of the top 4 things a CEO has to do is be an efficient capital allocator. It's funny, one of our investors, Feroz Dewan, who's one of my favorite people in the world, he recommended this to me one time when we were on a plane going somewhere. So, we're doing our 2024 planning right now, right? And so capital allocation is top of mind for us. And, there's a lot of opportunity for Procore, but really being judicious about how you allocate capital. It's not easy, but it's primarily, I'm the responsible party here, so I have to get it right.
What's been the biggest capital misallocation decision you've made?
It's a great question.
It is, you're right. I haven't asked it before, but I like that one.
It kind of gets to the regret thing, and I tend not to spend a lot of time thinking about regrets.
Do you not think you learned from the things that didn't go well?
But that's why I don't really consider them regrets, right? To me, they're an opportunity to learn. So we haven't made mistakes at the kind of the esoteric, kind of the big level where all of a sudden it's, things are we really screwed up. I've always been a firm believer. Again, this is actually my wife, which my wife always says the indecision is the decision. But I believe in the speed and the quality of decisions matters. So I'm much more willing to make a decision as long as the blast radius is small enough that I can live with it not working. And so you can make lots of little decisions along the way and learn as you go without having to make these big decisions that actually, can tank the business.
The indecision is the decision. I think we should have had your wife on the show. Was that an option?
I'm sure she's available. I can see if she's around.
Chase is like, before we move into marriage, which I do want to discuss, we touched on kind of who we are. I think people lose themselves often, bluntly, when they make a little bit of money. And it's something that I think more people should think about, is their relationship to money. How do you reflect on your own relationship to money and wealth today?
I don't really think about it that much, frankly. So, you know, there's a lot of young people will come to me and say, I want to be an entrepreneur, right? And I'm like, that's not a thing. You don't become an entrepreneur. Like, you follow a passion and you build a business and you whatever. There's this kind of a mismatch between, some people are like, I want to be like you because I want to be successful. And I'm like, that's not what I am. What I am is I'm somebody who's following a passion. I'm delivering on the thing that makes me happiest in life. It's not about making money. So I actually don't spend a ton of time thinking about money, frankly. And that's probably a privilege I have.
Do you find it seeps into other relationships? And I don't mean this too personally, but I find now that like people are quiet when you talk and people won't argue back as much with you. And that's actually quite sad. I wish they would.
Yeah, I had a very recent experience with a group of leaders at Procore who all got together, and it was a cocktail reception. And I was walking around and having conversations with people, and I felt like the entire time, like people were like, felt like they were on a job interview with me, right? It was like, you know, talking about what they've been working on, and like, you know, while their work is more important than other work or whatever. And I walked out and I actually called my wife on the way out, and I'm like, I honestly value so much just direct, like real feedback. Remember, I'm a carpenter by trade. Like I'm not some highfalutin CEO. Like I value the truth and I value kind of the input, and you get less and less of that as you get more and more successful. And so I keep a handful of people around. Actually, there's three people that I call my cabinet, right? One is my wife, Hillary. One is Suzanne, who I think you might have talked to.
I did speak to her.
And the other one is Paul, my ex-CFO. And those three people will call me an idiot all the time, and they'll remind me that my craziest ideas are crazy ideas. And they basically keep me completely grounded. You live in a world where everyone tells you that every idea that you have is genius, right? Eventually, your craziest ideas get acted upon, and they're not genius, right? So, like, I love having this governor on me, which is this council of people who remind me how human I am, and it really helps me a lot.
And I love the way you said the governor there. I love David Goggins. I don't know if you know him.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. And he says, like, everyone is mediocre and everyone has a governor on their minds and they stop at 40%. And so I just immediately thought of that when I heard governor. So you can tell clearly I listened to him far too much. Can I ask, that's one thing, but that's you. When you have kids, you then have to imbue those values on them. And it's very difficult when subliminally they're brought up in a nice house and a nice car. How do you imbue? And I've spoken to $50 billion founders, and 48 said this was the hardest thing. David Velez very recently said it, actually. But how do you imbue values, hunger, ambition in children when money's not a problem, bluntly?
It was something I really worried about when Henry, I have one son, he's 25 now, when Henry was young. Hillary and I looked at this a little bit different. So we have friends that will, though they will fly around on a private jet, they want to drive a minivan because they want to show their kids that they're not that or something. We never played those games. We always believed that we would try to make Henry be the most empowered and responsible person we possibly could from day one. We talked to him like he was an adult from day one. And so we basically just said, look, here are the guardrails. Do whatever you can within those guardrails. If you go outside those guardrails, all hell is going to break loose. And it did on several occasions. But within that, you have the latitude to do what you want as long as you're doing the right thing and you're not being an irresponsible person, right? And we are so fortunate that today Henry is one of the most well-adjusted. He's probably the most frugal member of our family, and he runs a very successful business at age 25. And I couldn't be more proud of him. But so here's a great story. Henry, at one point, he came home from his friend's house. He was like probably 6, and he was kind of acting like his friend and like kind of being spoiled or whatever. So Hillary said to him, like, look, either you stop acting like your friend and you become Henry, or you can leave my house. So he's like, no, I'm not going to do it. So she got him all dressed up. She packed a suitcase. She pushed him outside the front gate of the house and shut the door behind him. And he learned his lesson very, very quickly. And then, obviously let him back in at a certain point. But just being like categorical in how you instill doing right and wrong, and not having any like kind of leeway in how you apply it. Just it worked.
Henry is 25, Procore is 21.
Yep.
I'm always very nervous, honestly, Tooey, about having children, because I'm worried that I will be less performant, mediocre at what I do. Because if you want to do parenting well, you've got to be committed.
Yep.
How do you do CEO at Procore well and be there for Henry for soccer games, for pickup, for whatever that is?
I would say my biggest regret, Harry, in life is that I didn't do more. I wasn't there more. There are big swaths of his life where I was completely consumed by Procore. Fortunately for me, we have an amazing relationship, and he and I are like best friends. And
do you think that's just what you have to do, though? Sadly, if you want to be CEO of a public company, I'm not saying you can do well, but if you want to be the fucking best, you got to give it everything.
Well, like here's a great example. He and I were in San Diego yesterday visiting my mom, his grandmother, and we dropped him off on the way coming up north in LA, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, do you want to stop with me and go see the Charger game tonight, football game?" And I said, I would desperately love to do it, but I've got earnings this week and I can't do it, and just because I've got so much going on. And those are the tough, like even at this age where he and I are like best friends, I still have to make those really difficult decisions, and it breaks my heart, but like, it's just what you have to do. I think there's not enough time in the day to be able to do both amazingly well.
Did you have to do it? Sorry, I'm just pushing you. Like, did you have to do it? Like, could your CFO not have done stuff like that? I'm just like, you have many earnings calls, like what, 4 a year? And things like that Chargers game with Henry, probably is something you might remember, whatever might happen. You're never going to remember this earnings call.
That's a good point. By the way, these are the things I struggle with. I'm sure I could have, and I'm sure I could have. I do try to prioritize my kind of self-stability and wellness first, because if I'm not, I can't show up well. So that was part of my thing, was I needed to get home, get a good night's rest. We had a huge week this week, and I just didn't want to. I didn't want to start behind the 8 ball.
What do you do when you feel super overwhelmed?
Well, this is kind of a not well kept secret, but so if I'm really overwhelmed, fortunately for me, Hillary understands I'm an introvert. So for me, the very first thing I need to do is I need to get some alone time, right? So she will create lots of space for me to do my thing. One of the things that I do, which I love, is I will build extremely complicated Lego sets. Okay, so and people ask me like that's weird. Why do you do that? Well, first, I'm a builder. I like to build. And secondly, the thing with these complicated Lego sets is if you get one piece wrong and then you go 400 steps past it, you have to reverse all the way back to that step, get it right, and then go forward again. And I always think of it's like business, which is like every step matters. And so you have to be very intentional and you have to be very focused. And that focus on that particular act of building these complex Lego sets allows me to stop thinking about Procore for a finite period of time and allows me to kind of clear my brain. And it's something that just works for me. And people will ask me, they'll judge my stress level if I'm building a Lego set or not. Right now, I'm not building a Lego set, just to answer the next probable question. But
is the only thing public market analysts should be asking, how's the Lego? If it's like, it's good, very busy, it's like, oh, sure. If it's like, I haven't seen it in years, it's like a strong buy. Related to Henry, obviously, marriage. Again, like, I'm not married, but I'm. How do you make marriage work and be a public market CEO? Are there any tips that you have for me, genuinely, and for people to listen, that help make it work?
By the way, I want to lead this. I should have said this in the very beginning, which is everything that I'm saying to you, I have not figured out anything. I just know what I know, right? So nothing I'm about to say is like these. You should follow these as rules for yourself. But what I've found works out really well is that Hillary and I have been together on and off. Well, we dated, before we got married, obviously, but we've been together for like 35, 36 years, something like that. We've been married for 25 years. We know each other really, really well, and we complement each other really well. She's a yoga instructor, right? And I'm a CEO of a publicly traded company. And we have very vastly different worlds outside of each other. We basically allow each other to have that space. And that kind of
Do you like that she's not in your world?
I love it. You would be surprised to know that I think Hillary has probably attended less than 10 Procore events in 21 years. She desperately tries to keep a firewall between our family and Procore. And that's her contribution to it, is when I get home, we don't talk about Procore. We talk about the family. We talk about our relationship. We talk about our mutual
interest. Is that not hard? That I have this, but Procore is you. 20VC and venture is me. I can't separate it.
She forces me to. I've got a very, very strong-willed wife. I don't have a lot of choice, but it works. It works, and I would not be able to survive if I didn't have her. I wouldn't be a good CEO at Procore if I wasn't able to have, her supporting me through this process, which essentially means giving me time, and giving me my space that I need to kind of regroup and get kind of performant again. So, by the way, let me tell you this, because it's like business. When I set out on starting Procore, I kind of had this vision of like, someday we're going to be done and everything's going to be a state of nirvana, right? Founders like to tell themselves that. When you get married on your early days, you're like, hey, someday this is going to be perfect, right? Well, neither one of those stories is ever true, right? It's always a struggle and it's always a slog, but it's hopefully always a net positive that you actually benefit from. And fortunately for me, with my business and my wife, I've been extremely successful.
I had a guest on the show the other day and they said, Harry, you don't understand. The thing that people get wrong about marriage is they conflate marriage and happiness. It's not about happiness. It's about persistence, boy.
Yeah. And you asked me before, does it get any easier with Procore? It's the same things with marriage, right? It doesn't get any easier. Things become different, but things never, you still deal with challenges. Everybody does. And that's life. That's one of the things I think a lot about these days is that I think there's an perception that life should be stable and safe and predictable. People want that, right? But life is anything but that. Life is actually the complete opposite of that. And the more resilient you are and the more agile you are at dealing with adversity, the kind of ultimately the happier you are. So I think we have to dispel with the myth that we are all deserving of stability and safety and happiness in our lives, because that's just not a natural state.
I'm throwing a grenade in here. It's dark outside, it's cold, it's raining. I'm about to go and do a half marathon and cycle 40 miles, and it's like 7 p.m. I like that because I want to suffer, because I then just tell myself that I can get through that and the rest of the week will be cool. I find most people, honestly, who are young are pretty delicate. They're little petals. Do you agree? And do you not think that we have this kind of quite soft generation who actually need to kind of harden up a little bit more?
I have to really be careful of how I answer this question, because I have a lot of younger folks that work at Procore.
You don't have to. This is not a
No. But what I would like to say about that is that it's a little bit more complicated. I find myself, now that I'm 56 years old, I always try to question myself. Am I like the old man who's like, get off my lawn kind of guy now, and therefore judging the younger generation for being exactly who I was? I do think from adversity comes, well, you learn who you are, and actually you can derive strength. I think that we've been coming off of a very, very productive global economy for a very long period of time. There's been very few challenges that people have had to address in their early career. And so I think that does lead to some sense of, or lack of kind of resolve and I don't know. It's just, I feel like there's a little bit of that, but I also believe that the world works in cycles and that we're going to, we're in somewhat of a difficult economic time globally right now. If that gets worse, it's going to actually strengthen people. They always talk about the greatest generation being the World War II, the folks that fought World War II. I honestly think that the reason that it was the greatest generation is they dealt with so much adversity and so much was on the line that they didn't have time to complain about there not being enough oat milk in the refrigerator in one of your buildings at work, It's just a different time.
I wouldn't fucking mind that because it meant they were in the office.
Well, I'm old school too, Harry. Like I used to go to work and my only thing at work was I needed to make my boss happy and I wanted to earn a paycheck.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily the number one and number two things that most people look at when they look for a job these days.
Listen, I want to move into a quick fire round. So I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Sure, go for it.
So what do others not know that you know to be true?
If you do what you believe in and you're lucky, you can be successful, right? And I do believe that wholeheartedly. And I don't think a lot of people fully understand that you literally, anybody can be successful if they follow their passion and they have the amount of luck that's required in order for you to get there. You can be successful.
What percent, if you were to allocate percent versus skill to the success of Procore, what would you say it is out of 100?
Well, I would give skill probably the lowest ranking, because I would give persistence the highest percentage.
I would say that's a skill though.
Okay, well, if you call that a skill, then yes, I would say the skills, yes. I consider myself to be very lucky. I think about moments in my life that had to have happened, literally like single moments in my life that had to have happened that got me to where we are today. And it scares the life out of me when I think about like, if I had just done one thing differently at that point, like none of this would be true.
What's the most memorable?
Well, starting Procore was one. Basically what I had decided was I was going to wind down my other business and I was going to wind up Procore. And that was not a rational decision. There was, I was making a lot of money and I was very successful and stable in my last business. So that wasn't one. I had a moment when I was transitioning from construction into technology where literally a family friend knocked on my front door. I had just quit my construction job and I didn't know what I was going to do. And he offered me a job in technology. And I said yes. I knew nothing about technology, but he wanted to work with me and he wanted to mentor me. And so if I had not said yes that day, standing in my front door in my house in Sausalito, California, I wouldn't be here today.
What's the biggest thing you and Steve have disagreed on?
Generally, it was resource allocation. And he was right, and I was wrong. Remember, I'm the kind of maverick product customer-centric one. I wanted to build, deliver, spend. Here's a great example. In the very early days, we went to a trade show, and we had no money, and we barely could afford to be there. And I think we were all sleeping in one hotel room in Las Vegas together, like on the floor. And we went to the floor of the trade show that day, and there was a booth where they were making branded hats. So I went over and I bought 10 Procore hats, and I brought them back to the booth, and it cost $100. Steve lit me up like I had just tanked the business. He's like, "We don't have $100. Like, what are you spending $100 on Procore branded hats to give away at our booth for?" And we literally had this huge kind of knockdown drag out over the $100. So that was a tough conversation. And by the way, I still have one of those hats.
Well, someone's the grandpa on the lawn, aren't they? Steve.
Hey, we wouldn't be here without the grandpa on the lawn. He was he kept us afloat. So
you need a grandpa on the lawn. It's the joy of being young, though. Is I can say this shit and I kind of get away with it. You can be CEO of any other company for a day. What company would you be CEO of?
I would think it would be Microsoft because I have the fortunate privilege of having Satya be a mentor of mine. And I am absolutely fascinated by the complexity of that business and how he makes sense out of it all. Like, I always think Procore is complicated. We have, 11 products and we're, 10 different countries and, 16,000 customers. I don't know how you get your head around a $3 trillion business. And it's just, to me, it's fascinating. So I guess if they would give me the reins for the day, I think I would choose Microsoft.
What's the right way to view competition?
Keep it into a healthy perspective. I definitely think about our competition, but not very often. I think about our customers always. We used to have a NASCAR in Procore, which was a race car in the US, and we sponsored it. And one of our drivers once said, the way I think about competition is you can either stare at them in the rearview mirror and lose the race, or you can stare forward at the finish line and win the race. And so I've always kind of taken that to heart, which is like, listen to your customers, do what's right, and you'll win. And you can just bet on the fact that your competition is not going to be doing it as well as you. So I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about them.
You can have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, and ask them anything. Who do you have dinner with, and what do you ask them?
My dad's father, my grandfather, is no longer with us. I would give anything to have a meal with him now that it's funny, I'm getting a little choked up, but now that I've gotten to the point where I am in my career, he had taken his company public back in the 70s, and he ran a very large bank, and he was the CEO of it, and I watched him, and he was a role model of mine, and he always carried himself with such dignity and poise, but also authenticity. Like, he treated the person who opened the door for him the same way that he treated his board members, and I always thought like that was... So I would love to sit down with him and just kind of compare notes. How would you grade me on my performance? And, what can I learn still from you would be the biggest privilege in the world.
Did he see your success?
No.
I'm sorry. I think boys, we might get editors might take this out, but boys always want to impress fathers and grandfathers.
Well, the good news is my father is still around, doing very, very well, and he's
surprised.
Totally surprised. Like, literally, I was the kid in the family they had written off. Like, in my family, once you graduated from college, which I did not do, you got a free trip to Europe with the family to celebrate your future success. You got all these privileges. Well, I didn't do that. So like, they literally had written me off. I was working as a construction worker, making $15 an hour, living in a tiny little apartment. And I was not the one that was supposed to be the success in the family. So he's still, I think, relatively surprised by what's happened here.
I mean, that is just amazing. I'm a uni dropout too, so sadly never quite got that certificate. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
I was sitting in the front row of a class in college before I dropped out. And I was doodling on a piece of paper, and the professor walked up to me and she said, "Hey, you want a piece of advice that will change your life forever?" And I'm like, "Sure." She's like, "When you have 5 minutes, like you do right now, do a 5-minute job, tackle something." And I swear Procore would not be where we are today if I didn't think about that every moment of my life. If there's ever a moment of idle time, I find a way to fill it with something productive. And so therefore I am highly productive all the time. And I honestly think it's been one of the best pieces of advice anybody's ever given me.
Did you always know you'd be successful?
I never doubted that I would be okay. I never in my wildest dreams believed that I would be where I am today. I would have never even given myself that latitude. I always felt like I was going to be okay. And I think that's one of the reasons why we survived the hard times, is I just always believed that worst came to worst, I could go pick up a hammer and I could go to work and I could make, an honest day's wages and I would be fine.
What's the most lavish spend that you've had?
That's not fair.
Come on.
Just kidding. No. Okay. So, I like construction. And I own a ranch. And so I bought myself a Caterpillar bulldozer. And I spend the weekends building roads and bulldozing things, and I love it.
Come on. I had Cuban on, and he's like, the Gulfstream was pretty nice.
I don't own a plane. I try to keep it as, by the way, I drive a 5-year-old Toyota Tundra pickup truck that's all beat up and has a bent frame. And by the way, I don't do that because I'm trying to prove anything to anybody. I just do it because it kind of falls back into that authentic self. Like that, I'm a construction worker. Like I don't need all of that.
Good for the brand. I'm totally with you too. No, I honestly, I think that's great. And I'm so with you. I never get watches, never bought watches.
I may have just bought myself a decent watch for the very first time in my life. So actually my son, Henry, who's kind of likes watches, he's the one who turned me on to this, but it's not a fancy watch, but it's more than the, Apple Watch that I normally had worn.
Don't worry. We won't tell Hillary. It'll be our secret.
No, her motto is, you buy yourself something, I'm going to buy myself something. So it's all, that's the way it works. So we're very open and transparent.
Listen, final one for you. Where do you want to be in 10 years? You said about kind of this interesting kind of intersection of your life. Where do you think Tooey is in 10 years' time?
So I'm still only 56 years old. So let's assume they haven't put me out to pasture yet here at Procore. But I would say at that point, I am probably getting ready to think about retirement. Look, I've got this ranch that I love. I'm always building things. I just built a barn. I just built a deck. I just built some outbuildings, and I'm building a western town up there with like a saloon and a jail and a bakery and all this other stuff. So I'm going to have my tool bags on. I'm going to be at my ranch, and I'm going to be building something.
Listen, I absolutely love it too. I've so enjoyed this discussion. Thank you so much for putting up with my British humor, my wayward questions. You've been fantastic.
No, and thank you very much. By the way, I feel like I've been having dinner with a great friend, for the last hour and sharing a bottle of wine. So I appreciate it. And thank you for putting up with me as well.